If you're getting through to us, that means
You're only a couple days away.
next stop, Alaska.
All right. Well, I am Grant from Screen Rant. I am so excited to be chatting with you both for the final season of Sweet Tooth. I have loved this show since the jump, and this season just closes out on such a beautiful note. Susan, I'll start with you, and then Amanda, I'd love to hear from you both how it feels being at the end of this journey after 3 seasons.
Well, it's bittersweet. We're very proud of the work that we've done. I think that the story that Jim Mickle told in the 3 parts in terms of seasons 1, 2, and 3, sort of the perfect telling of it, and watching Gus's journey and his and Jeff's journey and the growth, all of that stuff's incredibly satisfying. But it's sad because, we're going to miss spending time with them, and we're going to miss having our weird little Dear Boy show and seeing each season what kind of new hybrids we can create and all of that. But it has been incredibly fulfilling.
Yeah. I think what's great is that the 3 seasons allowed for a real catharsis and a real coming of age and a real journey for Gus, which is really satisfying watching him really grow up. But we're going to miss all of these characters and all these people. Jim Mickle's the best, just talking to them every day. It was such a joy.
Yeah.
He really is both a joy and a genius with what he's
I
done
know.
on the show. So, yes, hopefully you guys can keep working in the future. So this season I find interesting because it appears to be the darkest season of the 3, as Gus has to face a lot of really heavy death in a sense, and Jeff struggles with his own mortality. Was there any almost concern on either of your parts when Jim came to you with this and you saw how dark it was in comparison to previous seasons?
I think we felt like it was a natural progression as we were watching the coming of age of Gus, and he went from being very naive, very innocent in season 1 and seeing the world for the first time, to obviously the second season where he's in captivity and starts to understand the true evils of people, and then coming out. And what is good about it is that he is still a beacon of hope. So for that hope to shine through, he needs to face things that are dark. So I don't think we had a fear. I mean, there are things that we are and aren't going to show on camera, but the suggestion that he has to face some of the darker aspects of people, I think it just lent to his ultimate growth that he had to get to have that full kind of cathartic, circle to get to the end of our story. So
and there's truths being uncovered, and I think that he's ready for them now. And the truths are a bit dark, and so I think it happens when you get older, you start to be able to handle bigger, darker things, and he was ready for it.
Well, I think you brought up something interesting, Grant, which was Jep dealing with mortality.
Yeah.
Gus is dealing with mortality. And again, that's something that we all know growing up. You do reach a certain point in your life, and obviously his is contracted. He's getting there much faster. It's like in dog years or something. But he has to face that truth as well.
And it really is. I mean, it's wonderful to see Christian really come into his own with Gus from that standpoint. So I loved it. Now, I'll save the spoilery questions for later. First, though, there are some big set pieces, some big locations in this season in comparison to previous ones. What was the most challenging and the most exciting one to get to bring to life on screen?
That's a great question. I mean, the boat was hard. There was so many. I mean, we knew that the 3rd season was going to be this journey across New Zealand. And there was a lot of challenges, but we knew we had to get bigger. I think the cave was super fun.
I was going to say the boat was probably the biggest challenge. The cave was the most important to get right.
Yes.
And what he finds in the cave and what that looks like and how he confronts it and how that is actualized cinematically, that really mattered because so much of the season is leading us towards that destination. And so it had to really work.
But we also had to create Alaska in New Zealand, not the time of year. There's a lot of challenges, but we knew it had to be expansive and really deliver on all of the kind of promises of what we'd set up previously. So we went big.
And I'm glad that you did, but I'd also love to expand on the cave a little bit because you mentioned, the importance of capturing it cinematically, and I find it so intriguing its blend of very practical effects with CGI, and I'm curious how dedicated you both were to ensuring that it either stayed as practical as possible or that the effects artists really took the time to make it feel real.
I mean, Jim Mickle always set out in this show to do as much practically as possible. He was really inspired by Jim Henson's work, and and we had this incredible puppeteers and artists in New Zealand. So honestly, a lot of it was practical.
Yeah.
Our production design team there, Nick Bassett being our leader, was just incredible. But also our DP, we had, LED all around. We had a lot of layers to the practicality. It wasn't so that the lighting could be right, so that all of these things, it was as much when you walked on set, you felt like you were there. And then our VFX Matt is amazing, and he tweaks, he elevates, he makes sure that he sharpens.
Yeah.
But I would say a lot of what goes into it was made in New Zealand.
That's incredible. And that I love that dedication. Practical effects are still just incredible to see to this day. Okay, now I do want to get into spoiler territory now because there's a lot to unpack from this season. The bringing back Pubba for the Vision. What was like? Jim had talked about his big pitch deck that he had for this show. Was that in there when he first came to you guys and was like, Pubba's gonna come back eventually?
I don't think the specificity of his coming back but from the pilot, when we hired Will Forte and he was in the pilot, we knew he was coming back.
He just had to resonate. He resonated. We had to keep going to this very clear touchstone. It had to be there to feel full circle. Also, Will Forte really wanted us there. Really wanted to come back.
Yeah.
He really wanted to come back. So, but we all knew that we'd had to have him again, and how important it was.
In the end, how will I know who's gonna survive?
Okay, so big man, I was bawling at the end, not knowing the answer to whether he gets down from the mountain. Jim told me he has an opinion, but he won't share it. And I'm curious to hear both of your thoughts on whether you think he made it down that mountain.
I always don't know what this says about me, but I really firmly believe he did not make it down the mountain. I think it's important. For me, it's important that Gus really goes on that journey and has to experience death again, and that it's really full circle, and that's what the journey is set out from. But I think that Jim was so inspired to have that final moment where you could still maybe believe. But we know.
Yeah. Okay. So emotionally, Amanda and I talk about this a lot.
Yeah, we do.
And emotionally, I believe he made it down because he's eventually going to die. He's mortal. Like it's going to happen. So he's still dealing with that reality. And I want to believe it. Now, technically speaking, if you look at what he's wearing, he really hasn't worn that in a really long time on our show. And so it probably lives in Gus's memory. And it is saying he is still there with him.
He is always with him.
He is going to always be with him. And I think, honestly, that's the more emotional and poetic version of it. But as I'm watching it, I'm not going to believe it.
Yes.
That it was like left up there like a climber on Everest. No.
I'm right there with you. I from a realistic standpoint, I don't think he made it, but from an emotional standpoint, I want him to be there. So we'll leave it open. Exactly. I see I'm almost out of time. So before I let you both go, Susan, really quickly, Guy Ritchie's coming back to the Sherlock Holmes world with the prequel show, but I'd love to hear, is there any update on Robert's third movie?
I mean, look, it's like, no, there's no update other than it's still very much alive in our hearts. We want to figure out
every day.
Every day we talk about, what is the best right next version of that? Because anytime I see Robert and Jude together, which fortunately I do get to see a few times a year, we hang out and I'm just like, can I get these guys back on screen together?
Magic.
But there needs to be a really strong reason. It needs to be a great story. And we do have some things in the works.
Well, I love to hear it because I adore both of them and those movies. So I look forward to hearing it. But in the meantime, I really look forward to keeping the word alive about Sweet Tooth. Kudos to you both for all the work you've done on this show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Lead the way, Sweet Tooth.